How about an old Aesop fable this week? The north wind was blustering about how it was the most powerful force in the natural world. I've uprooted trees. I've swept away buildings. I've even reshaped solid rock as I've persistently blown upon the mountains, declared the north wind. The sun in response smiled and shone, which all the more sent the north wind into a huff. Let us take up a competition to compare our strength, said the wind. And at that moment came along a man, a traveler, who wore a long overcoat. The north wind declared that whoever could strip the traveler of his overcoat would be the winner, proving their superior strength. And immediately the wind began to howl and growl and blew upon the traveling man. With the first gusts of wind, the man's coat whipped about his body and he clung to his lapels. The north wind blew harder, and the man clutched his coat tighter still, pulling it tightly around himself. And the harder the wind blew, the more tightly the man held himself in his coat. The north wind tore angrily at the jacket, but it was no use. His efforts were in vain. And then came the sun's turn. And the sun smiled down on the man gently, warming him after the frigid wind had chilled him so deeply. And after a few moments, the man loosed his grip on his coat. He unfastened the buttons down the front, and soon he removed the jacket altogether, turning his face toward the warmth of the sun. And the moral of the fable, because fables have to have a moral, is that gentleness prevails where force and bluster fail. Rhythms of gentleness. My mind actually moves really quickly from that Aesop fable about the north wind to another story found in the Old Testament in 1 Kings 19. A prophet named Elijah had just seen the power of God in some profound and impressive ways. But at this point in the narrative, the prophet finds himself in trouble. His life is threatened by the wicked Queen Jezebel. And God comes to Elijah in this moment, and he tells him to go and climb a mountain and wait for him to show up. And the narrator says that then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. And that was the moment Elijah knew he was in God's presence, and he covered his face. And he began to speak with God. God had shown up in power multiple times for Elijah. But in this moment, God showed up in gentleness. And this is God. Strength and gentleness. In fact, you can't be gentle without strength. Gentleness presumes strength. If we avoid the error of conflating strength with aggression or forcefulness, then we can start to see this, that strength is potency. Strength is capacity to accomplish one thing or another. And if the fortitude or the strength or the capacity to accomplish whatever that thing is not available or inherent, we would probably use an entirely different word to describe the actions that result. We would probably say something like weakness rather than gentleness. But God isn't weak. God is gentle. Strong and gentle. There's a beautiful poem in the book of Isaiah where God addresses his people. It's this message of hope where God says, "Your God is coming. Yes, the sovereign Lord is coming in power. He will rule with a powerful arm. See, he brings his reward with him as he comes. He will feed his flock like a shepherd. He'll carry the lambs in his arms, holding them close to his heart. He will gently lead the mother sheep with their young." Again, God is strong and powerful, and God is gentle. In the Gospels, in Matthew 11 specifically, Jesus invites weary, burdened people to come to him and find rest, to learn his ways because he is gentle and humble in heart. That is where the soul finds rest, in the gentle strength of Jesus himself. And as God's people, we too are invited into gentleness, not weakness, not powerlessness, not a life as a human doormat or as a punching bag, but a life of gentleness. When Paul talks about prospective leaders in the church in 1 Timothy, of all the things that he could name as prerequisite, Paul says gentleness is an essential trait. He tells Titus that all believers should not be quarrelsome, but be gentle and show true humility to everyone. Gentleness is wise. And like all good wisdom, it actually practically, functionally works. Maybe you've experienced this to be true in your own life. Maybe you've had those moments where, like the north wind, your most dogged and forceful efforts to affect a particular result have ended up producing the complete opposite response that you hoped for. But when you take a more gentle approach, you actually find some success. I see that reality played out every time I try to assemble a piece of IKEA furniture. I try to force those stupid little widgets and bolts to fit together, and they never do. And the more I force, the worse it gets, and I strip the Allen keyholes. And so I invariably call my lovely wife, Liz, to come in for reinforcements. And her much more gentle approach totally works every time. And that's why we have a bed. The Epistle of James says that wisdom from above is first of all pure, and it is also peace-loving and gentle at all times. Francis de Sales, who was a bishop around the time of the Protestant Reformation, who was well known for the very gentle way that he navigated a tumultuous time of incredible religious division, once said, "When you encounter difficulties and contradictions, do not try to break them, but bend them with gentleness and time." I am still kind of learning that one, and I'd like to assume I'm not the only one. So where do you desire to experience gentleness in your life? Where do you long to have God's gentle strength meet you? In what ways do you desire to experience more gentleness from others? And how do you specifically want to become more gentle in your own words and actions? Take a couple minutes to jot down any answers in your workbook. Pause the video if you need. And after you've reflected on that, consider where you might be resistant to the experience of gentleness. In what ways do you doubt the gentleness of God, holding instead to this disfigured image of a God that portrays him as forceful and aggressive? Where have you become convinced that forcing your own way or will is the only way forward, and so you cling to these aggressive strategies? Where do you find yourself prone to live by hard words and hard actions? And how might you be resistant to the notion that the spirit of power that God has given you can still be powerful through gentle responses to the world around you? Jot down your thoughts and reflections, whatever seems most important to you, most fruitful. And may you find rest for your soul with Jesus, who is gentle and humble in heart.